at Invicti. I've been in the cybersecurity industry for the past 15 years. I have my screen there as well. I've been in different sectors as well. I've been doing iGaming and also I've been in the e-learning front. And I love dogs and I love anything to do with wheelchairs, with cars and bikes and mountain bikes and all that. And with me today I have my colleague Antoine.
Hi, I'm Antoine Debono. I'm thrilled to be with you today. I work in Matthew's team at Invicti Security. I wear the hat of Information Security Specialist with a focus on security operations. I started the journey on InfoSec around 9 years ago now. I had the privilege to work at Meta as well for over 8 years. I have a passion in protecting the digital footprint, incident response, and threat intelligence. I've done a number of certifications as well in offensive security, such as OSCP and GWOT. When I'm not basically doing InfoSec or threat hunting, I'm mostly watching football. I'm an avid football fan, so yes, that's my passion as well.
Do you want to tell us with whom you side, by any chance?
Better not, because we're not doing well at the moment. I'm a Manchester United supporter, so we better skip this part.
All right, on to the next. So, a bit of an agenda before we start. We shall have an introduction about open source intelligence. From now on, we shall call it OSINT, because we need more water, saying operational intelligence all the time. We shall discuss the history of operation of OSINT, how it all started. It's not something that has been here, for the past few years. It has been here for a long time. We want to talk about security operations of OSINT and how it can be of value towards your organization. And then we'll be talking a bit about strategizing OSINT. That is the part that I will come in, because today the main speaker is Antoine. And we shall also discuss how AI can improve open source intelligence, and we will end up with some demos and a Q&A at the end. So, before we start, I'd like to understand the type of people that we have within the audience. And I'd like you to scan this QR code, and I'll be honest with you, we're not phishing you here, it's a real QR code, which essentially would like to understand how many people have prior knowledge of open source intelligence. I will give you a minute, and then we will get back to it.
We'll get back and continue with the presentation, basically. So, never or have a low level of experience in threat intelligence, so hope you can find this more interesting and you will learn more about threat intelligence. So let's start with a definition first. What is threat intelligence? So basically, it is the collection, analysis, and application of data in identifying current or potential threats. So let's use the analogy of football. In gathering intelligence about your next opponent, getting to know how they play, which players they have suspended. That's all in the intelligence gathering. Then we have the sources of threat intelligence. There are a number of sources of threat intelligence, one of which that we will be focusing on today is the open source threat intelligence. This varies from social media posts, websites, blogs, anything that's online. Also, there are the internal security logs. So as you might know, we gather lots of internal security logs from number of servers, resources, endpoints, etc. These can be Active Directory, email servers, etc. And then there are the commercial threat feeds. These are more specialized feeds, which you can acquire from specialized companies that provide you with threat intelligence. Most of the time, it is more specified to your current security posture. So that's basically also, there is also specialized intelligence. But why OSINT is important for cybersecurity? OSINT makes the companies be more proactive in their cybersecurity strategy. You can identify the same threat before your attackers do. So the proactiveness will enable us in building a more security resilience in our security posture. In reality, we all do intelligence. So, for example, everyone check reviews of restaurants that they will be going in the weekend. So everyone does some sort of intelligence. So let's go back to understand where intelligence started and why it's really important nowadays as well. I'll go back to World War I. Picture this: Germany sent a secret message to Mexico telling them to join forces and attack the US. This message was intercepted by the British intelligence. The British intelligence used logs from shipping, diplomat notes, to be able to decrypt and get this secret message decrypted, and basically they convinced the US in joining the British in joining the World War I. So that's one example where the intelligence might have started. Boston Marathon bombing, a more recent event. It was one of the first where intelligence was crowdsourced, where authorities turned to public to gather photos and videos of the marathon to identify the perpetrators behind the attack. So using these photos and videos, they were able to identify the terrorists behind the Boston Marathon attacks. Next event is a cybersecurity event, one of the biggest cybersecurity attacks that happened in 2017. It was the WannaCry ransomware. It impacted large companies and authorities around the world, one of which was NHS, which had damages of over 100 million euros in damages, and had their data encrypted, and also their solutions inaccessible for a period of time. So, and how OSINT helped in the WannaCry ransomware? It helped other companies to identify their threat surface, if they are vulnerable to the WannaCry attack, if they are vulnerable to that particular CVE that was being exploited by the WannaCry attack. It helped also in building the kill switch, the switch to stop the WannaCry attack. That's when WannaCry basically stopped. A more recent event that we had in the news last week, it was one of the biggest interceptions and breaches of intelligence, where Hezbollah had their basically supply chain intercepted, and basically they implanted explosives in their pager devices and in their walkie-talkies, which they were eventually distributed to their people and detonated, killing a number of people and injuring thousands, basically. But OSINT and threat intelligence, it's not just for spies. We can use it for personal use, to identify if our personal password is breached, our email address is breached, etc., etc. And obviously, it's really important to be used as well in a corporate environment. So basically, today we are going to discuss the application of OSINT in security operations. We can apply it in threat detection to detect a particular threat. So to have a number of IPs which are acting maliciously around the world, it's really important to detect an attack. We can use it also in vulnerability management, basically to identify those CVEs which are currently being exploited most. So we fetch them and give them priority, reducing the risk.
Antoine, can you explain what a CVE is? Because yes, they might not know.
A CVE, it's a vulnerability. So basically, it's a common vulnerability that there is actually a patch behind it. So it can be like, and there are various types of CVE. There are CVEs that gives you remote code execution, the ability to be able to execute commands on the remote servers. We'll be showing you in the demo later on a particular CVE as well, and how we are going to exploit it. Finally, there are tools and techniques. There are a number of tools and techniques which are open source as well out there. There are tools that we normally use every day to find an IP address and the domain behind that particular IP address. There is Shodan as well, which is the search engine of devices, the search engine of Internet of Things, which we also will be using later on in our presentation. OSINT and defense in depth, how we implement OSINT in our current security operations. So first, we implemented in the threat identification to be able to proactively implement threat identification in our security operations. So having a list of email addresses that are currently being used in a phishing attack and able to implement these in the blocking mechanism of our email servers will give us a proactive threat identification. Layered approach. Security, we see it as a layered approach. We have different layers in security. So starting in a corporate environment, normally we start from endpoint protection, going to firewalls, VPNs, web application firewalls, DDoS protection, etc. These are all layers protecting our security posture. All of them are important, and OSINT can be seen as one of them, and it's a horizontal layer across all these.
Sometimes we say that cybersecurity is like an onion, right? So
yes,
the way you peel an onion, there's a defense in depth approach, correct, Antoine?
Yes, we use the analogy of onion security basically because we have a number of layers. Hopefully, if one layer fails, we have another layer. So
and
that's
you
the
hope
idea.
that we don't cry, right?
Yeah. Eventually, yes. Staying ahead of threat actors. So yes, OSINT gives us the ability, threat intelligence gives us the ability to have the point of view of the attacker from an outside view. So we look at the corporate environment, digital footprint of our corporate environment from an outside view. This will enable us in being ahead of our threat actors as well. So it's a really important perspective that we need to take into consideration. Finding threats before breach. Unfortunately, as you might know, for an average time for a company to identify that they have been breached is around 200 days. And 200 days, it's long enough to exfiltrate all the information, all the data, anything that IP that your company might have, code, etc., in 200 days. So it's really important to be proactive and have OSINT in identifying and reducing this amount of time as much as possible. The last thing that they would do normally after they exfiltrate all the data, normally they would implement a destruction mode like ransomware and extortion for money, etc., etc. So it's important to be proactive. Basically, when we do proactive threat detection, we will be reducing the risk of our company. So patching our public servers will reduce the risk of having a public exploit attacking our infrastructure. Incident response efficiency. How can we, okay, now we have an incident, how can we use OSINT to help us during an incident? So OSINT is really helpful during an incident because it will make you aware of other incidents across the world which are similar to yours, and you can identify patterns, you can identify ways how the others mitigated this incident, and also contain it much faster than others. So making use of OSINT in incident response, it's really important, so we minimize the damage and isolate as much as possible the damage by the security incident. Tools that gives visibility. In security operations, we have a number of tools. These are one of the main ones, basically, that we have in security operations. So we start with extended detection and response. It's like an antivirus and endpoint protection with steroids. Basically, it has a number of sources all gathered in one tool, but also gives us the ability to respond to a particular incident. So having tools that are gathering OSINT and also are able to respond if someone tries to communicate with a malicious IP address, it will be prevented and stopped immediately at start. So if there is a phishing site that we know that it's doing credential harvesting, we can stop it immediately from the extended detection and response as soon as we are aware of that. Security information and event management. SIM, it's the tool where we collect and ingest all the data from various sources. Like I've said before, like Active Directory, email servers, it's like an evidence board, but it gives us also a real-time threat detection. OSINT can help also in this part in providing us a quick real-time threat detection. User behavior analytics, UBA, it monitors our user persona, our username and password. It's really important. Most of the time it's the last line of defense. As we know, it's important to implement MFA where technically feasible to protect our user as much as possible. These user behavior analytics goes beyond this. So basically it also monitors patterns and anomalies in patterns. For example, if a user normally logs in from Malta and one fine day, or in one fine day logs from China, for example, we are alerted, and most probably also it will require the user to re-authenticate. It can be an action that we might implement as well, so it's a response action. Finally, the dynamic application security testing, which analyze running the application. Basically, it's the scanning of websites. It's important as well. We all have websites. They are the first thing that they are looked at by the attackers. So having web application security scanners, it's really important to identify any potential vulnerabilities on these websites, web applications that we actually do.
All right, so a bit of strategy when it regards to OSINT. To me, OSINT is like a canary, literally. It's like a canary in a minefield, right? Because it gives you an early warning of what's going to happen. Now, what is going to happen to you as a company or as to the type of genre of a company that you have, OSINT provides that kind of intel. Secondly, I find that OSINT is very important as well in relation to risk management. When you're actually doing risk management, which is really important, so at the end of the day, you don't look at cybersecurity as a silo. You're looking at a cybersecurity model to have risk being identified and to enable companies to take calculated risks all the time. And OSINT plays an important role here for a number of reasons. Why? Because you want to identify potential threats when it comes to your area of the business or else to the area of your geographic location. Yep. Another area is incident response. Anyone knows what incident response is? Hands? No? Yep. Okay, cool. So when it comes to incident response, and let's say, for example, you actually have a threat, right? With OSINT, you can understand even better the nature of that threat. Maybe you want to see whether that threat is just being siloed to you as a company, or else to a geographical location, or else to a number of companies. Maybe you want to understand as well, you identify a hash value within that file, and you want to search for that hash value to understand who is behind this kind of threat as well. Another area is security awareness. When it comes to security awareness, to me personally, I find that you actually get a lot of value when you actually show people in your company something that belongs to them. So if you're looking at passwords which have been leaked online, you can go to these people and say, hey guys, your personal email address has been leaked. Are you using this password? All of a sudden people are feeling, and they have an emotion around it, and they can actually feel and understand how important it is to have proper password sanitization, for example. And finally, the idea here as well is to look at the monitoring and compliance of it all. Because at the end of the day, if you have, for example, a password leak, or you might have another asset which has been leaked and it is online, because of compliance, you can catch this issue early, and you can mitigate this issue before something hits the fan. And you know what hits the fan, right? I can't say it because I think we're being recorded. So next thing is some considerations. Yes, OSINT is cool, but what we're going to do about OSINT? There are a number of things that we need to regard, and one of them is legal, and Carl is our legal counsel there, our legal and ethical compliance. You need to make sure that what you are searching is ethical as much as possible. You need to make sure that you are within the boundaries of the law. You need to understand that, hey, there's GDPR, there's the California Act, yada, 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 and you are within that particular boundary. Another thing is the relevance and the quality of the data. So when you're looking at the quality, if you're looking at high-level searches, like for example, lots of people in OSINT, they just put in their domain names there. But what about other assets? What about your IPs? What about your company credit cards? What about your secrets when it comes to your IWS? These are important things, important assets that you should be monitoring. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think we have 100-something assets, right, that we're monitoring within our
over 150 now.
Yeah. So, we're keeping our OSINT strategy quite, on the go all the time, and we're actually monitoring this in real time, and we're actually getting reports out of it as well. But anyways, another area is the integration with your existing infrastructure. When you talk about OSINT on its own doesn't provide the best value. You need to integrate it within your security program. And here, Antoine mentioned the SIM, and that is where exactly you need to have such information. These logs need to be with the logs of your SIM, because you need to correlate this data. You need to understand that, hey, this data, why do I have this? And what happened during that exact same time, on my XDR solution? Or as if you're using Azure, who logged in at that time? You need to correlate all this data all together for you to provide a story and a picture, especially if you have your CTO, breathing down your neck. Do we have an update? Do we have an update? Of course, this is life. You have that CTO man barking at you all the time. And trust me, I know all about it. And finally, there is, in the OPSEC strategy. We're looking at the OPSEC, you need to be careful that you are providing searches without revealing yourself. Because the open source intelligence is quite messy. You can't reveal your intentions, what you are searching for, because you might end up, sounding the alarms, and hey, why are people, looking at Invicti all the time? Invicti, interesting. So you need to be as low-key as possible. Ideally, you don't directly search, OSINT, but you search through a third party, a company that collates all the information for you, and you search within that particular database. And the important thing is continuous monitoring and updating your assets, because OSINT is not something that you create once, fire and forget. OSINT is something that you have to keep on putting in more intel, more assets. Maybe the legal department changes, their model, and you need to add that information within your OSINT. Maybe your finance team changed the credit cards, and you need to update that. Maybe you realize that, hey, there is a third-party company that you need to actually monitor. And in fact, we use OSINT as well for vendor management, because for me, I want to understand what my top 5 vendors are doing. I want to know if AWS is being breached. So in my OSINT, I have to put information there to understand the attack surface of my vendors.
Yes.
So we have another poll now, and now that you have understood maybe a bit or a lot of what OSINT is, I'd like you to basically scan this again, and again, this is not a phishing attempt, but I'd like to understand now whether you think that OSINT is important for the organization or not. We'll give you a minute.
We'll review the results of this question later on at the end of the presentation.
And even the first one, I think. Or
yeah, it's done.
Okay.
We can review it as well. So we're using Slido, and basically the participant code is OSINT-MT. Let's continue with the session. We've heard Prof. Alexei Dingley speaking about AI, and AI is also impacting OSINT as any other tool and terminology, basically. But how AI is impacting security operations and OSINT. So we can see AI as a threat. Attackers are using AI to gather information about your infrastructure, to gather information about a particular exploit, how they can attack Active Directory, how can they use this particular exploit to attack an email server, to write believable phishing emails. and more effective phishing emails. So AI is being used as a threat to us as well. It's being used also as a target. So most of the time, companies are launching AI projects such as chatbot, for example, but are we testing enough our chatbot that our chatbot is not divulging any confidential information if asked and tried to be attacked by a malicious threat actor, for example, asking for the password of the email server to a chatbot? There are known attacks in these kind of lines, basically. Also, AI as a tool, which gives, it's a breeder in security operations, basically, because we have lots of data going on. We have logs from internal servers, we have OSINT, we have social media, specialized threat feeds, and to have all this data analyzed by a human being, it's getting practically impossible. So AI-driven analysis is imperative going on from now. Automation and threat detection. So AI is allowing us to be more proactive and more automated. So basically through AI we can have response capabilities. Like for example, if you detect that this user is logging on multiple servers with administrative account, you block that account. So these kind of response sections and automations is enabling security operations in it's fast and basically it's security because it's gathering lots of intelligence from lots of feeds. So it's really fast. Now we are moving on to some demos. I will be starting with a demo basically using DNS. I will be using a test domain and our internal test domain. I'm using the tool DNS Dumpster to dump the DNS of testsparker.com. Hopefully, I will be identifying any subdomains in our testsparker domain. As you can see, I already enumerated the registrar, which is Gandhi. I enumerated where they are hosted, the IP addresses, and subdomains. So there is a particular subdomain, which is php.testsparker, REST, etc. I have also a view on how these connect to each other and connect to their particular IP address. Now I'm moving on to, I was able to identify the underlying technology, so it's PHP 5.2.6. Now I'm moving on to identify any exploits related to that particular PHP version. So I'm using an exploit database, a well-known exploit database, and do a search about this particular PHP version, trying to identify any available exploits out there which could possibly give me the ability to attack our TestSparker domain site. And as you can see, there is a particular code injection where we can inject code in this web application and to be able to have remote code execution as well from this particular application. Now I'm using AI, I'm using ChatGPT to help me understand more about this exploit, to learn more about how I can use this exploit, or maybe from a security operations point of view, how I can mitigate this exploit. All I'm writing is explain in detail the following vulnerability, and I'm pasting the information with all the code that I have found in the exploit database. And as you can see, ChatGPT is here to help us. It will give us information on that particular function, how it works. It will give us the vulnerability description more in detail, examples of code, and how we can exploit it.
So essentially, you don't need to be a developer, right?
Not really.
Nowadays with ChatGPT, you can be a script kiddie and get all the information, and you can use that information actually to provide an exploit.
Yes, exactly. So here we will go through the exploit. As you can see, you have to identify that there is this sort by parameter, and you can then inject PHP functions. As we all know, there are PHP functions that gives us ability to perform remote code execution on the respective server.
By the way, do not try this at home.
By achieving and inject code, you would be able to like dump users, escalate permissions, etc., etc. Then you can also do lateral movement to other machines in your network. So that's basically our first demo. You have also a link to these tools if you would like to explore further. Now I'm moving on to the next demo. So as part of our security operations, we check the news for latest vulnerabilities, for the latest CVEs that we have discussed earlier, and one fine day we have noticed that over 300,000 microtic devices were being exploited and are vulnerable to a number of CVEs, and we have a number of microtic devices spread across the world. They are vulnerable to 4 CVEs, 2 of which are high severity. I will be picking this particular CVE, looking at into the national database of CVEs. Basically, it's a known database for CVEs. And I'm looking into more detail about the CVE. And there is a link for the exploit of that particular CVE. What's an exploit? Exploit is code that will be exploiting that vulnerability and gives us back, in this case, remote code execution. So, as you can see, we can find the details, we can find the code, and also which versions of these microtic devices are impacted with this vulnerability. Now I move on to the next tool, which is Shodan. As you might have heard, Shodan it's like a search engine for devices. I will be using some Shodan dorking, so I will be using the country code of Malta. So I'm doing country code empty, so I'll find any devices that currently resides in Malta. I will be also looking for products which are microtic, so I can identify any microtic devices in Malta. And also I will be looking for port numbers. So basically the port number that Winbox is available on. So any devices that are in Malta, that are microtic, that have that port number open, we have over 500 devices in Malta. I've done this demo last week, so it should be quite accurate. Now, as you can see, we have enumerated also the versions of these microtic devices in Malta. Now I will be filtering as well with vulnerabilities. So Shodan gives us the ability to filter with the vulnerabilities that are available on these devices, on these 500 devices. And I will try to find, and basically I will identify 4 devices that have that vulnerability that we have identified the exploit code before. So CVE 2018-14847. We have 4 devices in Malta that are still accessible. The port is open, so that's it. Now I'm wearing the attacker hat. I have a demo. This was all set up locally. So it's a microtic router, version 6.4.2. And I'm taking the same course as before. So basically I will do a Google search for the exploit. There are a number of exploits. I will use Google dorking as well sometimes because it's very helpful to identify. Like for example, if you want code, you look in GitHub, which is like a code repository. We can also look at Pastebin, for example, which is a paste site where there are lots of exploits there. So now we have identified a proof of concept exploit for that particular vulnerability. It's the same one that we had in the previous news, basically that were linked to the news. And as you can see, the only requirement is to have Python 3 on your machine. And it's quite easy because all you need to do is declare the IP address and the port. Basically, this particular exploit will give you the username and password of the administrator. What I will be doing is I'm copying this code internally, so I'm getting the code that is currently stored on GitHub, I'm cloning it locally, I'm creating a directory and cloning it locally. As you can see, I'm using an internal IP address because it's an internal setup.
Yeah, I don't think the law here in Malta will cover us if we had to do it.
No.
No.
So now all the code in GitHub is at my attacking machine. I'm using Kali. Basically, it's an operating system which comes with lots of inbuilt security tools. So it's easier for us, especially when we're practicing or doing any demos, it's easier for us to have some tools inbuilt, and it's also used a lot for these kind of searches. Now I'm giving executable permissions to the Python script that has the exploit, so it is able to run in my machine. Now I'm writing the code, the command to call the exploit, which is python-box.py. I'm writing the IP address. In our case, it's a private. In case it's a public IP address, you need to change the public IP address. And as you can see, we have the admin and the password right there. So the password is a relatively complex password. So it has length, it has different characters, etc., etc. Now we'll check if this password actually works. We'll go back to the router. We try to log in, and that's it. We have access basically to a complete network. And from there, now we can laterally move to the whole network. We can sniff traffic, etc., etc. So yes, that's basically it. From now on, it's game over, basically.
Insert coin.
So next, I'm sharing with you a collection of OSINT resources. So basically, this page is a collection of resources, all related to OSINT. It contains tools, it contains blogs, linked to news which are like focused on OSINT, other resources such as books, blogs, newsletters, anything. I find it really handy because I have most of the things in one page. So also there are links to a number of operating system training as well, open source books, some of them are really interesting, virtual machine, and remote code, remote browsers, etc., etc. So polls review. Let me check again the poll. If anyone have not done it yet, please. In this session. Hope you find it interesting and feel free to ask any questions now. This is Matthew's baby, basically.
I said I'm a developer in the beginning. Yes, his name is Buddy. And he's also my assistant because he's with me every day when I'm at work, and he even comes to the office. Anyone has any questions for us? Anything?
You have questions in the Slido. You have questions.
Oh, we have questions in the Slido. Wow. Okay.
It's really slow.
Would you like to give us the questions yourself, maybe? Let me read them. Thank you. I hope there is no... All right. Because there are some friends here who might ask silly questions. But I'm just going to say them. What are the guarantees about the security trust of links provided in the OSINT framework? The truth is that anyone can open a PR and add a link.
Yeah, so this OSINT collection, you mean, or...
Apparently it means, I think it's in general. So, you know, how can we trust that information, right? Because obviously it would be the normal Joe Doe would be uploaded.
Yes.
And in reality, if I may start, I don't think you can trust everything that there is out there. So that's why you need to correlate your data. That is why you need to ensure that the data actually makes sense, and actually correlating the data with what you have and with other sites. When we're doing OSINT intelligence, we're looking at all the different areas like Facebook, we have Telegram, we're looking at the dark web, we're looking at all the various sources, and then we are correlating that data to make sure that it does make sense. Yes, there is data which doesn't, but it's the same thing, you know, I mean, like everywhere. I mean, ChatGPT can provide bad outcomes. So it's important as well that you actually do your homework.
Yes, basically the trick behind it is to collaborate as much sources and evidence, collect as much evidence on that particular claim. Like, for example, if someone is claiming that you have hacked a particular company, you have to collaborate that particular news with like various sources and also reputable sources. So as Matthew have said, you have to like correlate and collaborate all the evidence as much as possible. We all know that like even like social media, lots of people write crazy stuff on social media. We have to like be careful on what we are reading and what we take into consideration. So we also need to collaborate with a number of sources. Also, there are some platforms, such as the malware information sharing platforms, where it is more a controlled environment where you can share intelligence as well. So systems such as the malware information sharing platform is a controlled way environment because all companies are known. They meet up every now and then in physical meetups as well. So if you can collaborate with systems such as MISP instances, it will make your evidence even better.
Another question from Mr. Camilleri is if there are any local entities that provide open source intelligence here in Malta.
I'm not aware of any local.
But there's like the MITA, that can provide.
Yes, so MITA provide on a national level, intelligence on a national level. There is also the intelligence agency in Malta. So, but as a private company for specialized threat feeds, I think it's something that we actually don't have in Malta, and it's something that we lack. So, for example, the national, no one analyze our national threat landscape, I would suggest, I don't know. Or... Hi.
It's been years since we last worked with each other. As you know, I do run the community like OSS Malta, which is Open Source Society Malta. Yeah. We actually run a couple of blacklists, which is also backed by the European Union's OSOR, the Open Source Observatory. And the blacklist that we hosted on our website, which can be used for PFSense, OpenSense, and AdBlock Plus and so on, is mostly for DNS-related entries to prevent users from making the connection to malicious endpoints. Like these text messages we keep getting about Malta Post and other stuff. So as a community, we are doing public listings, and we're also looking into OSINT and how to share information about OSINT for the community. So it's something that I'll reach out later on to try and collaborate with.
Let's collaborate. Yes. I mean, Invicti is a Maltese company as well, so it's giving something to the general public too.
To bring the topic back into it, as you had mentioned earlier, that we might be recorded and it might not be legal to do the exploit in the actual session, I'll bring up the case of those students who did the university.
That's what I was referring to when I said about it also.
And there are people here who do reach out to the community and tell us about certain exploits to share and to see if it's able to be done publicly. And we've till now told them to stay in the shadows because obviously it's not clear and not safe for ethical hackers to present certain information to give awareness on. So it's a bit of a catch-22 for everyone. Hopefully we change mindset soon.
Yeah. Responsible disclosure was always a pain point here in Malta. I know there are work in progress at the moment. I think there is a paper which everyone can contribute to it, which is specifically being articulated on vulnerability disclosure in Malta. So there are work in progress as well for vulnerability disclosure on a national level. Also, I would recommend that every company has its vulnerability disclosure policy and makes it clear as well in their website. So every company should have a way how you can communicate responsibly and a vulnerability is identified.
Put that text file, right?
Yes. Normally it's like a text file that gives you the contact details and the encryption key to be able to communicate with the respective company and provide and do a responsible disclosure of any particular vulnerability on their basically endpoints.
Any other questions? Just wait for the mic. My wife tells me that I don't hear her, so I have to pretend that I'm not hearing you as well.
Yeah, so about the ChatGPT or AI models, so we needed like a safeguard to make sure no one asks weird questions or learn how to exploit the system. So because now your demo is tell us, oh, you can use ChatGPT to attack anyone. So how we can prevent that?
Yeah. So, for example, ChatGPT has a number of...
Right, with ChatGPT to actually go further, and it just doesn't let you. So we've tried many things, but...
Yes, but we know that there are models which are currently being created for attackers as well. So ChatGPT won't give you any answers, but there are models that are being built specifically also.
What ChatGPT did here is it explained the actual script, right?
Yeah.
So that, I think, is the closest we can get with ChatGPT.
Instead of looking like for a YouTube video on how to exploit that vulnerability, we just pasted the exploit and asked the ChatGPT to explain further on that particular exploit. We all know also some vulnerabilities on attacks on LLMs as well, such as hallucination attacks. So it's another AI is another technology, and it's there, and it's also continuously under sort of attack as well. So we cannot exclude that AI cannot be compromised as well.
Good. We have one final question here. Anyone who has more questions, please come and speak to us. We'll be more than glad to help you out. But the last one is, is the dog an expert in social engineering for snacks, cuddles, and belly rubs? And the answer is definitely whenever he's at the office. I don't know, I mean, he's always being cuddled by everyone. He looks at me with a smirk. It's like, yeah, I'm getting this cuddle right now. And, his body is literally my body. So, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.